torch, guiding through the maze. Victory's the mission in the darkest days. Real leaders rise, no scripts, no charades. Built from the ashes where legends are made. Speak truth, break chains, step into the light. Rewrite the history, transform the fight.
Welcome to Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, the podcast for people who've been through the hard stuff and kept going. I'm JJ Hardy, Army veteran, leadership coach, and the guy behind the book, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. Every week, I'll bring you stories and strategies from everyday warriors, resilient leaders, and those rebuilding with purpose. Whether it's a solo message or an unfiltered conversation, you'll walk away with tools, truth, and the fire to keep going. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. And I'm here with Michael today. But real quick, before we get started, because that conversation is going to roll, I just know it is. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick plug for my book. You saw it on screen just a second ago. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, a veteran story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up. And this is my story of the hard stuff and what I learned along my journey of poverty, all the stuff that I dealt with before the military, combat in the military, and then the tough transition afterwards, and even now into business ownership. So if you're interested in that, it's on Amazon.com. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. And now to the important stuff. I'm here with Michael Joesten, and he's actually in a similar space as I am, but he does it a little differently. But that's okay, because that just means we're going to have a great conversation. How you doing today, Michael?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I couldn't be more thrilled, to get another leadership development professional on here. It means a lot. And, there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out of this. And I just know there's going to be some actionable steps after our conversation today that people will be able to use. So, if you wouldn't mind, you're in the leadership development space, as I said, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about, maybe a little bit of your background, why you started a business, what you're actually doing as a business, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you know what, to kick it off, thanks for the work that you're doing here. I don't think we can have too much leadership development
No.
and leadership training in the world. And the more voices we have, the better. So you're reaching a big audience, and thank you for the work that you do, JJ.
Thanks, sir.
So, oh yeah. So if I go back, I'm going to go back to when I started working, really. And the first couple of jobs that I had, I don't think they probably weren't out of the ordinary, but they lacked some inspiration. So my first job that I had out of, I was still in high school, actually. I worked for an electrical contracting firm in Chicago. And I worked with a bunch of guys, and and these are great guys, right? Blue collar, make the world work, right? Especially in Chicago, the city that works. But there was one particular executive at the company, and he was like way too old school, and it was just come down hard and pound, 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 pound. And I'm like, 17 years old, 16, 17. I'm like, whoa, what is this all about? Right. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess that's it. And I kind of took it. And then, other guys, they pile on. And again, that's how they were taught. That's the world they came up in. Right. And they didn't know that there was a better way. And I suppose in some ways that what he was doing was it sort of worked. I mean, he kind of got results. And with certain people, he got good results, but other people he didn't. Well, then, if I can jump forward a little bit, I went off to college, and then after college, I had my first job after college in retail management, and it was a real similar thing, right? It was pound, 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 numbers, 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 threat, threat, threat. Right? And just this overbearing district manager that I had. And again, I'm like, this, it's certainly not bringing out the best in me. I know it's not bringing out the best in other people. And so that's what really started my work with, and as I was that manager in that manager role, starting to understand what really motivates people, and even more importantly, how do we create environments where people want to do good work? Because fundamentally, I think at the most fundamental basis of everything that I work with, I firmly and honestly believe that people want to show up and they want to do a good job and they want to contribute. I mean, bar none. Yes, you've got outliers, right? But for the most part, I think people really do care. They want to do a good job. It's just sometimes they're in an environment where that leadership is lacking, and they're not able to bring their best selves, their full selves, and really contribute in a way that they want to. So that's
Agreed.
what got me started through all this.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's interesting about that is, on the flip side of that, I don't think anybody shows up to work trying to do a bad job. So when you think about it that way, there's a driving force that brings people to work, and sometimes it's money. Sometimes they think that job really could be different than the last one, and they might enjoy it. Uh, but whatever that why is, at the end of it all, we spend most of our time at our 9 to 5. We spend more
Yeah.
waking time there than we even get to spend with our families, cumulatively. Yeah, I can't even say that word right now. I don't know why. But, when you think about it that way, why wouldn't you come up with strategies to make a better workplace? I say leaders without education create bad habits. That's why I'm in the space that I'm in. I'm pretty sure that's the same with you.
Yeah.
But what's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Again, I believe it's really all about environment, and what environment are our leaders creating. And the good news is it's not overly complicated, right? Back to our belief that people want to show up and do a good job. Well, then they want to do that. So step one in creating this environment is basically tell me what a good job looks like. Just tell me, right? Like when when I'm done, what does success look like? And then I'll do what I need to do to make sure that I get to that endpoint where success looks good. The problem that I see is leaders don't do that. They
No.
don't give clarity. They don't tell people here's the expectation. Here's the I remember one time actually I was working with a client, and they hired this person had a lot of promise, and as it turns out, once this person came into the sales role, then the leadership went to this individual and said, all right, we need you to go to this 2-day class, and by the way, you need a laptop in order to participate in this 2-day class. Oh yeah, and the 2-day class, it's an overnight, and it's 3 hours away. Well, this individual's like, I have a kid that I have to take care of. I can't be gone for 2 days, and I don't have enough money right now to buy a laptop. And like, well, these are, this is what we need you to do. And it ended up this person didn't work out and they had to leave. And my question to these leaders was, why weren't these expectations laid out clearly in advance of? Why is this in hindsight that expectations are being shared? And so that's just a simple example, but everything, it's like, let's just set the proper expectations up front so people know, oh, okay, now I can do this. Now this is how I can, show up and start doing it. I think the next step then in that process or process of creating the environment is to tell people, yes, you're on track, or no, you're off track. It doesn't have to be the pound, right?
Should never
Doesn't
be
have
the
to be
pound,
the
pound, pound.
name calling, right, that I have. But it can be, all right, we talked about here's this is where we wanted to get to, but you're not getting to that point. And then what's getting in the way of you being able to get to that point? And let's figure that out. Is it lack of training? Is it lack of knowing? Is there some other, emotion? Like, are you fearful? Are you unsure? Do you lack confidence? What is it? Because as your leader, I'm here to help you figure those things out so that you can come fully into it. Now, a side note with this has to be a lot of psychological safety, right? Especially with new people. If we're building a team or we're new to a team or we just bring somebody into our team, got to be a lot of psychological safety to be able to ask those questions. Because if I ask somebody just out of the like they've been with me 2 weeks and what's the matter? Are you afraid? What's the answer going to be? No, I'm not afraid, even if they are, right? Is anything wrong? Anything getting in the way? Oh, no, no, no. I'm fine. I'm fine. Right. That kind of reflex agreement is a sure sign of a lack of psychological safety. So before that, I need to build that, encourage people, share with people, have other people on my team being able to express their concerns or their uncertainties, and then show I'm here to support you and help with that. Then giving that feedback again, yet either you're on track or off track. And then another element, and it's going to be on my blog post later this afternoon, it's all about recognition, recognizing people for good work that they do, right? Recognizing when people go above and beyond what's expected of them, recognizing when people live, we all have, or a lot of organizations, and it's certainly something I strongly encourage and work with companies on, is building their values and understanding what the values are that drive their business. So when people live those values like in a meaningful way, to recognize that. And sometimes, and this is a whole nother discussion, but sometimes you do that publicly, sometimes you do that privately. It depends on what the individual wants. But that's what we're talking about. When we talk about delivering guest service, what you did right there is exactly what we're talking about. Do more of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then thank you, right, for doing that. So those are some of the fundamentals of creating the environment where people want to show
Well,
up and
cool.
do a good job.
Yeah. I mean, culture is important, and that starts from the top down. And a lot of leaders out there actually think that you need to hire great, or else the whole environment's going to be horrible. And that's true, but what they get wrong is that they just bring people in, bring people in, bring people in, bring people in. But if you don't understand what your culture is, and you brought up the mission and the values and the different things that build your team and make that trust, well, then how do you even know what type of person needs to be on that team? And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. Part of building a culture is bringing the people that fit in that culture into the business, so that you're not having to waste all of the thousands and thousands of dollars having to fire and retrain, because when it's obvious when somebody doesn't fit. So it's worth the time, the effort, the money, and the energy to figure out what that culture looks like, so that you can bring those right people in there.
Absolutely. This is where in interviewing, one of my favorite tactics is, or strategies, is the behavioral type questions.
Yep.
And it's what that looks like is, tell me about a time when you did this, right? But it can't be a one size fits all. It's whatever unique to your own individual organization. So if being proactive and dealing with a guest problem before it's an issue is one of your values, so being proactive is, then you ask, tell me about a time when you saw a problem coming and you headed it off and you made it better. Couple things. The reason that I like that so much is that when we ask it in that way, tell me about a time when they can't tell you what you want to hear, right? Because
No,
if I
no.
were to, right, if you or I were to interview someone and say, "Are you good at heading off problems before they start?" we're we're setting them up to lie to it, potentially
Yeah,
lie to us, right?
right.
But if we say, "Tell me about a time when you did," and then what I really like too when I ask these questions, and I like watching people almost kind of think about it or struggle with it, and right, and that tells me something about the person as well. Like, there's got to be a time I did something like that, and maybe it's creative, or maybe, well, not exactly that, but there's this or that. Does that count? Right? And so that can lead to a really cool conversation with people, and
Mhm.
tells you a lot about who they are. The other thing about that question, a lot of times, sometimes I get people like, "Oh yeah, I did that all the time." Right? I constantly would do that. Great. Tell me about a time. Oh, I did it all the time, like almost every day. Great. Give me an example. If they can't give you an example, they it's just, it's not part of who they are, and that's fine. Right? I think that's the other important thing. That's fine that you're not. It's fine that you're not that you don't do that. It's just, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we really need. You're going to be much happier someplace else. We're going to be much happier with somebody else that has that. Now, here's, I guess, one other caveat to that. I don't know that you can get 100% of alignment. It'd be great, but you need at least more than a tipping point of, right,
Yep.
of alignment. So, what are those really crucial things? And then, I guess the opposite side too is, like, there's some non-negotiables. Like, I don't care how angry you get, and we all get angry. You cannot lose your mind and berate people and blah blah blah, or you cannot, whatever those non-negotiables are, right?
Yep. Yep.
I think that starts to set up those expectations, as well. So, getting clear about what those values are, what's important in the company, what it looks like, and then using that in interviews. It's also a way to go back to when people are on board, to be able to revisit and say, "Do you remember when we were in the interview and we talked about this and that?" Right? We're not kidding about that. Those are
Yep.
important things. And here might be a situation where you did not do that. What did you learn from it? You and I talked the other day about, action after action reviews, or I also call them plus deltas. In that interaction, what went well, but knowing what you know now, what could have been done differently, right? What can we add to the arsenal so that we can, achieve what we want to, relative to this situation, right? Because this is what we're going for. And and what happened isn't exactly there. So what do we need to fill in to make that work?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Um, absolutely. The crucial thing that you bring up in the whole setting expectation piece, I like that a lot because uh, that there I do have a portion of that in my new manager course, my first time leaders course, and the reason that it's so important is because the famous saying from all my leaders before me was, if you don't tell them, you didn't tell them. And you may think that there's an implied thing with whatever job description is out there, but if you catch somebody off guard because you didn't say something, then you actually did the opposite of setting them up for success, and that set them up for failure. And you didn't
Yeah.
just set them up for failure, you set the team up for failure, and potentially the business, depending on what that task was. So
Yeah.
building that expectation, but then understanding how to manage that moving forward too, as things change, because it doesn't matter what business you're in. And I know from you being a serial entrepreneur and all that in your past, you already know that it doesn't matter what your business model is. You have constantly changing elements within your business all the time. And actually it's
All the time.
important for growth and for a sustainable business to have those changes, because if you just do the same thing over and over and over again. Isn't that the definition of insanity? So, yeah, the setting and managing expectations thing, it's very, very important to make sure that you're doing that. But, you brought up the term, and I think I understand it from when we talked last week, but you mentioned that you like to say that you lead through the trenches.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, that was my background, right? So, um, and and I feel like they need a disclaimer and such. So I don't have a military background, so it's
Yeah.
not those kinds of trenches, right? And I mean no disrespect by
Well, no,
using
but it's a
that
fun
term.
saying. I was
Yeah,
just curious. That can mean something different for everybody. And since you put
yeah,
that in your bio, I wanted to
yeah.
ask, what does that mean to you?
So for me, what it means is, so I had that job in retail, right? And to be honest, I hated it. I just did not like it at all. I was confined in these four walls, and I made I also just it's part of who I am. It's well here, all right, here I am, right? Here's the situation I find myself. These are the cards I'm dealt. I got to play the best hand I can with the cards that I'm dealt and do the best that I can. And I was actually successful in that role, in several different measures. I really didn't like it. Ended up leaving that, got a job that I really, really enjoyed, really a lot of fun. Couple problems. Number one, I was really on my own. So, and I think I've heard you talk about this too. Like at the very least, we lead ourselves, right? That's start point number one is if we're going to be a leader,
Absolutely.
we got to lead ourselves, right?
Yep.
So that was cool, and I did, and I I was a sales rep for a belt and wallet company, but I was on my own. I'm out and about my own territory and did my own schedule and everything, and again successful in several different measures, but wasn't really sharpening my saw when it came to influence and working with others. So I kind of missed that. For better or worse, the industry changed and that job ended because the industry just didn't need that position anymore. So that's when I started my first company. And a buddy of mine had um, shown me a invention that he had come up with in the gift industry. And for quite a long time, I just couldn't stop thinking about this thing that he had invented. And with my background as being a sales rep, I finally realized, you know what, this thing has. I mean, people will pay for this. I know it. I just deep down know it in my gut. So I went to him and I said, look, if you make these things, I will sell these things. And he's like, all right, let's do it. Started really small. Started with a rep group in Chicago. Started getting sell-throughs. That was awesome. So then I started building out a sales team across the country, and that's where I started learning more about leadership and what was motivating to them and what was important to you know those reps and those companies that were repping our product. What were the people that the end buyers concerned with or the retail customer or the retail buyer, what was important to them. So starting to understand what's all important to everybody, and then how to create these things where everybody gets what they want, where everybody can win. And let me tell you, the gift industry, I'm no different than other industries, I'm sure, but everybody in the gift industry hated everybody else in the gift industry. and, and everyone was trying to undermine everybody else. So I'm like, all right, well, what can we do to make this better so everybody can win, right? Not everybody has to lose. Um, and then we built that company up, and we were able to sell it. Learned a lot of really great lessons in there. took the sale of that and started a restaurant. So now real leadership, right, really had to come into play because we had low paid people, but had high demands, and we wanted to deliver this really superior product and stuff, and this was really right where the rubber met the road. And what are ways, and I'll tell you, I didn't have it all figured out. I'll be, this was many years ago. And but how do we create these environments? How do I make what's important to me important to them? I've I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, well, nobody cares about my business as much as I do. And I think that's true to a point. But again, going back to our original belief, people still want to show up and they care. I mean, they really do care. So what are some things that we can be doing to build that up? Well, unfortunately, and to make a long, sad story short, we ended up having to close down that business, and it just didn't thrive the way that we wanted it to. But I was sitting there thinking, all right, I've got this one successful business, I've got this other one not as successful. And we can talk about this later if you want. Failure is not part of my dictionary or my lexicon, but have this business that didn't do what I wanted it to do. So now, what are the lessons that I'm taking from both of these things, and how can I be of service to others? So that's when, back in 2007, when I started my consulting business, was I knew that there had to be other entrepreneurs, other business owners that had similar challenges, similar struggles, and how can I share what I've learned along the way with them so that they can create um, great businesses with great teams, with high performing teams, and they don't have to go broke doing it. They don't have to invest in a ton of stuff. It's really, again, how to create that environment. So that's what I mean by when I say I was in the trenches. And then in my consulting work as well. So I'd go out and I'd learn something new, like culture. I really didn't know what that was prior to me starting to understand, or first hearing about it. Then I'm like, all right, well, this is really cool. Let's learn everything I can about culture. And now let's implement this. Let's execute this for our clients. Let's put this into practice. And then some things are going to go well and some things are going to go wrong. And that's okay. That's how we learn. And how do we make those adjustments and adapt and keep moving forward? And then the hiring strategy, right? What are the elements of a good hiring strategy? And learn all about that. And then let's execute on this. And then some things are going to go right, some things are going to go wrong. And what can we learn and adapt to? And then engagement, and right, and just all along communication, how to properly confront somebody about something, on and on and on. In the trenches means learn it, use it, learn from it, adapt, right?
Sure. No, that
And
makes
keep
perfect
moving.
sense. That makes perfect sense. Speaking of that, so I'm guessing in your consultancy business, those are the types of things that you do. So if
Yeah.
you wouldn't mind sharing the name of your business, what you help with, and how people can get in contact with you. That way, when this episode is over, you live on in infamy.
In a good way.
Of course. Yes.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I work with CEOs, I work with executives. I in anywhere from, well, my sweet spot is really in that million plus revenue business, but all the way up to $50 million companies, anywhere from a dozen or so employees up to hundreds. I had an engagement where they had 750 employees, and I would work with departments within that very larger group. But I work with these executives and leadership teams, and they're all doing well. I think that's the other thing. They're doing well. It's not like anything's necessarily broken, but they still have people challenges. And if we're honest, all challenges are people challenges,
Yes.
right? We're not robots. We don't live in the matrix. We need people to execute on these things that we want. And as soon as you uh, uh, um, hit that people side of things, that's when things start to, right, um, potentially create problems and challenges. I have a couple of different ways that I engage with people. One thing I can do is it's very low risk introductory offer. I do two different lunch and learns. One is all about how to create a mindset for high performance, and the other one is the fundamentals of having a best place to work um, culture. From there, then I do a next level, I guess, introduction would be to have either a communication workshop and that's where we identify a communication plan and use some common language that people throughout an organization can share and be aligned and on the same page with. And then also there's an element of that which has to do with conflict resolution. So, there's going to be conflict anytime there's two disagreements, right? Uh, there's by definition conflict. It doesn't have to be this huge dramatic, thing. It really becomes an opportunity for growth and moving forward. So there's an element of that. I also do one on a workshop on direction, alignment, and commitment. So it's everybody agreeing, here's where we're going and why. Alignment means everybody knows their role and how they individually contribute to that bigger thing. And then commitment really is, it's not a commitment to the goal, it's a commitment to everybody else. Like your military background, right? You know that you know you can trust people in your unit as much as they know they can trust you, right?
Yep.
So it's building that commitment to one another, and then again, how do we create that environment where people can do that? Then I've got some other programs that are longer term in nature, if that's of interest to people, and I also do executive coaching. And it's not only for executives, but it can be leaders, managers, general managers, executive level people. But you can see, and my contact info, everything's at michaeljoesten.com. I've got a flyer under services about my coaching, and in that I say sometimes it's good to have somebody that with no other agenda than than to just be there for the individual person. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits my clients get in coaching is they know they can trust me and they can share things, and together we start to create action plans for moving in a great direction for them.
Heck yeah. Well, based off of our discussion today, I guarantee that's true. So, or
I
at least I get the
appreciate that.
feeling that that's true. But thank you for coming on here and being a guest. And I'm glad you were able to share your point of view on leadership with the world. And we had an opportunity to discuss that. Yeah. And I thank you for being a guest on my show. And in closing, I always ask people this at the end of the show.
Yeah.
If you had one piece of advice to share with maybe a new leader or somebody who is going through it as a manager, what would that piece of advice be?
I think unequivocally it's Be totally self-aware. Do anything and everything you can to be as self-aware as you can so that you show up the way you want to show up. And that's a whole nother thing, but I've seen people, they say one thing and they say this is what I'm all about, but then they do an entirely different thing and they're not even aware that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to build a team and they're actually doing things that are destroying a team.
Mm-hmm.
They want to lift up and support people and they're actually tearing people down. And they don't even know that they're doing, and they're not doing it meanly necessarily. It's just they lack that self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So start to become objective about yourself, step back and look at yourself in a very objective way, and build that self-awareness so that you're able to say, oh, I guess I am not showing up completely or fully or as good as I could, or yeah, there is something I can learn here. I think that's the number, and then throw in a lot of humility with that as well. That's what I would
Agreed.
tell any leader.
Man, that's great. And I think a lot of times that just comes from a lot of times a lack of mentorship or maybe a lack of experience surrounding that person. And unfortunately, what happens is that manager, director, doesn't really matter what level you're at. You can get to that point in any level of your leadership, especially if you don't know what to do. But it comes out of just getting in that survival mode. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really
Yeah.
think that's what it is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yep. But thank you, Michael, for being a guest. And as promised, as always, everyone who watches my show knows that I'm going to put this up here and tell you about it again. This is my book, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, just like the name of the podcast. It's my story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up. And it's my story to help people who are going through it to pull themselves up from their bootstraps and get out of it. And that concludes the show. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. And again, thank you, Michael, for being a guest. And we will see you all next time.